clapperboard intro. Today, we're diving deep into the wild, the confusing, and sometimes completely baffling world of philosophy, but with a twist. We're not just analyzing ideas in the quiet corner classroom or quoting dusty texts. No. Today we are confronting the most outrageous, absurd, and mind-bending Michael Sandel takes that will make you question everything you thought you knew about philosophy, morality, and the way we live our lives. Yes, Michael Sandel, the man whose lectures on justice, ethics, and moral dilemmas have captivated millions worldwide. The same Michael Sandel who takes concepts like fairness, freedom, and responsibility and turns them into questions that shake the foundation of your thinking. And yet, some of his takes, some interpretations, and some moments from his lectures, interviews, and debates have left us scratching our heads, wondering, did he really just say that? In this video, we're going to break down the 7 parts of the most puzzling, controversial, and downright frustrating Michael Sandel takes, and I promise, by the end of this, you'll either be laughing, crying, or seriously reconsidering your life choices. So grab your coffee, put on your thinking cap, and let's journey to the wild world of philosophy, where genius meets chaos, and clarity sometimes hides behind the fog of intellectual bravado. This is Losing My Mind at Awful Michael Sandel Takes. The overly complex moral dilemmas. Let's start with something that Sandel is famous for, the moral dilemma. You've probably seen his trolley problem lectures, right? At first glance, they seem straightforward. A runaway trolley is heading toward 5 people, and you have the choice to pull a lever to redirect it, killing one person instead. Do you pull it? And boom, the class explodes in discussion. But here's the catch. Sandel doesn't just leave it at that. He layers in additional variables. What if the person on the side track is your best friend? What if they're a criminal? What if they are an elderly philosopher who has contributed immensely to society? And then he asks, does it matter whether the person is pushing someone onto the track or whether the trolley is automatic? At this point, your brain is spinning, and you start thinking, wait, why did a trolley scenario about ethics just turn into a multi-level ethical labyrinth where no one leaves unscathed? And that's exactly Sandel's brilliance, or sometimes his madness. Because while he's trying to teach us about moral reasoning, sometimes it feels like he's purposefully building a maze where the exit only exists in philosophical theory. And yet, despite the complexity, there's something undeniably captivating here. You can't look away. You start to realize Sandel isn't just asking about trolleys. He's asking about life itself, about the choices we make, the unseen consequences, and the moral responsibility we carry, even in the most trivial seeming actions. But let's be honest, sometimes the layers of nuance can be exhausting, confusing, and yes, a little bit mind-bending. The paradox of justice and popular opinion. Moving on to part 2, the paradoxical world of justice and democracy. Michael Sandel has a way of blending political philosophy with real-world examples, and one of his more infamous takes is on the tension between justice and popular opinion. He argues that sometimes what is popular is not necessarily what is just, and sometimes the just thing is unpopular. Now, at first, this sounds simple, even noble, but Sandel takes it further, much further. He asks, should a society uphold a law that most people agree with but is morally questionable? And conversely, should it overturn public opinion for the sake of ethical principle, even if it causes outrage? Here's where things get tricky. In lectures, he uses examples that are simultaneously engaging and headache-inducing. Take affirmative action, for example, or healthcare distribution, or even the allocation of organs for transplantation. Sandel forces you to sit with the discomfort of the question, do we follow our gut or do we follow principle? And while this is exactly the kind of philosophical inquiry that keeps universities full of students, it can also feel exhausting. Because Sandel doesn't just give answers. He gives frameworks, hypotheticals, and hypotheticals within hypotheticals. You start to wonder, am I thinking about justice, or am I thinking about a thought experiment that has no practical end? Yet, herein lies the genius, and sometimes the madness of Michael Sandel. He pushes us to confront the difficult reality that morality is rarely simple and justice is rarely convenient. He forces us to challenge our intuitions, to question societal norms, and to engage in the kind of thinking that most of us conveniently avoid in our day-to-day lives. But let's be honest, There are moments when the hypotheticals feel like a labyrinth designed not to guide you, but to make you feel like you've lost your mind. And that's exactly why we're here, examining his takes with both awe and incredulity. Because philosophy, when done at Sandel's level, is as exhilarating as it is exhausting. The marketplace morality debate. Today, let's dive deep into the wild. Michael Sandel's sometimes take on markets and morality. Philosophy. This is where a philosopher truly. We're not just analyzing ideas in the quiet corner classroom or absolute confusion. No, Sandel argues today we are confronting life should never be commodified, absurd, and mind-bending Michael Sandel duties that will make you question even certain medical procedures you knew about philosophy, morality, and the way we live our lives. It seems straightforward. Yes, sure, Michael Sandel. We don't want everything to have a price tag, the man whose lectures on justice, but then he complicates moral dilemmas have captivated millions worldwide. Should we allow people to pay more to skip Michael Sandel takes concepts like fairness, or pay more for school responsibility, and turns even to pay more that shake the foundation of your programs. And yet, suddenly, some of his takes, your brain starts doing flips, some moments from his lectures, because what seems like a simple critique of capitalism scratching our heads into a complex moral negotiation. Did he really just say that? And this is exactly where the mind break down the 7 parts of the most puzzling, controversial, Sandel doesn't just downright frustrating Michael Sandel challenges your assumptions. I promise. He forces you to ask. You'll either be laughing, crying, or seriously reconsidering your life choices. Or is any inequality inherently unjust? Put on your thinking cap. And when he starts layering in and let's journey to the wild world of philosophy, anecdotes and thought experiments, where genius meets chaos. You feel like your clarity sometimes hides behind and slowly losing your grip on reality. This is, for instance, losing my mind at awful Michael Sandel. If a private company pays people to donate overly complex moral dilemmas, is that inherently wrong? Let's start with something does it actually benefit society? And then, moral dilemma. Before you can answer, you've probably seen his pivot to the ethics trolley problem children to read books or at first glance recycle. They seem straightforward. You're in a runaway trolley is heading towards like a philosophical escape. You have the choice to pull a lever to redirect. But here's the thing: killing one person as exhausting and frustrating as it can be, and this is also the magic class explodes in discussion. He doesn't give easy. But here's the catch: he forces Sandel doesn't just leave it that, and sometimes layers. Thinking is exactly what makes us feel like what if the person on the sidetrack is your best friend. Ethics challenge. What if they're criminal? Part 4 is where Sandel dives into philosopher ethics, who has contributed and this is where things get truly philosophical. And then he asks, and for some, does it matter whether the person is pushing someone unlike other approaches that focus on the trolley or automatic? Virtue ethics asks a deeper, your brain sometimes unsettling question. Wait, what kind of person should I be? Why did a trolley scenario about ethics just when Michael Sandel talks about virtue, ethical labyrinth, he doesn't just mean being nice or honest. And that's exactly challenges audiences to consider the very foundations of our moral character. Because while he's trying to cultivate moral reasoning, in society we sometimes it feels like he's purposefully building a maze where the exit only exists but at the same time, philosophical theory. It can feel like a relentless assault on your despite ego, the complexity. Because he asks questions like, there's something undeniably enough to stand against injustice? You can't look away. Are you compassionate enough to care when it costs you something? Sandel isn't just asking about honest enough to confront. He's asking about life itself. About yourself, about the choices we make, and the just when you think you have a handle on it, and the moral responsibility we carry, world dilemmas, even in the most trivial take the question of citizenship. But, for example, let's be honest, Sandel asks sometimes the layers of virtue citizen be exhausting, ought to cultivate in a democracy, and yes, a little bit mind-bending, civic the paradox of justice, moral integrity, popular opinion. And then he pushes moving on to part 2. What about the paradoxical world of justice and humility and debate, or the Michael Sandel has a way of blending political philosophy with real-world examples. You feel simultaneously, and one of his more infamous takes is on the tension between classic Sandel experience and popular opinion. But here's the twist: he argues that sometimes ethics isn't just what about being popular is not necessarily what is just. Sandel frames in such a way that it exposes our personal and collective shortcomings. Now, at first, forcing us to confront this sounds simple truths about society, but Sandel takes it further, is much brilliant and mind-bending. Because while we're busy admiring his philosophical that most people agree with, but is also realizing just how little we thought about our own virtues should and overturn public opinion for the sake of ethical serious way. Even so, yes, this is part of the journey where your mind feels where like things get philosophical fire in lectures. But the fire is exactly what makes Sandel simultaneously engaging the ethics of technology. Take a modern action. For example, Part 5 brings us or healthcare to the 21st century, or even Michael the allocation of organs for transplantation. And if you thought Sandel forces you to get more mind-bending question, think again. Do we follow our Sandel gut, takes the tools and innovations of modern life. And while this is exactly artificial kind of philosophical to genetic engineering, that keeps universities from social media to the gig economy, it can also feel and ask the hard question because Sandel doesn't just give answers. Does it mean we should? He gives frameworks, consider AI-driven and hypotheticals within hypotheticals. Sandel asks, you start to wonder If machines
am I
decide
thinking about
the
justice,
job alone,
or am I
medical
thinking
treatment?
about a thought
How do we
experiment that
ensure
has no
fairness?
practical end?
Or take genetic editing. Herein lies
If
the
parents
genius,
can choose
and
certain
sometimes
traits
the
for their
madness
children,
of Michael
what does that
Sandel.
mean for justice,
He pushes us to
equality, and the
confront
very
the difficult
concept of
reality
human
that
virtue?
morality
And
is
then there's
rarely
a seemingly simple question of
justice
online
is
behavior.
rarely convenient. If
He
social media
forces us to
rewards
challenge our
outrage and
intuitions,
virality,
are we
question
complicit
societal
in shaping
norms,
morality
and to
based on
engage
clicks
in
and
the kind of
likes?
thinking that most
Sandel
of us
doesn't just
avoid
present
in
these
our
issues
day-to-day
abstractly.
lives. But let's be
He challenges
honest.
audiences to
There are
think about
moments
them
when
in
the
a deeply
hypotheticals feel like a
personal way.
labyrinth
He
designed
makes
not to
you
guide
ask,
you, but to make you
what
feel like
decisions
you've
am I
lost
making in
your
my
mind.
daily life that
And that's
contribute to
exactly why
ethical
we're
dilemmas
here,
I didn't even
examining
notice?
his takes with both
And
awe
suddenly
and
your phone, your
incredulity.
choices,
Because philosophy,
and even your
when
morning
done at
routine
Sandel's
become
level,
part of
is as
philosophical
exhilarating
battlefield.
as it is exhausting.
And here's the kicker. While Sandel provides incredible frameworks for thinking through these questions, the hypotheticals can spiral into mind-boggling complexity. You start thinking, am I learning, or am I trapped in a maze of ethical thought experiments that will never end? But that's the genius of Sandel. He forces us to wrestle with questions that don't have neat, satisfying answers, and in doing so, we realize a profound responsibility we carry in a rapidly changing world. By the end of this part, your brain is tired, your moral compass is spinning, and yet you can't stop thinking. You're hooked, challenged, and yes, slightly terrified, exactly how Michael Sandel intends you to feel.
Controversy of
morality
civic education.
today.
Now,
Part 6
let's
takes
dive
into
deep
Michael
into the
Sandel's
wild.
most debated
Michael
theories,
Sandel
and sometimes
civic
take on
education
market
and its
morality,
role in shaping
This is
society.
where philosophers
Sandel
truly
not
start
just
to
analyzing
that
education
campus
admiration
about
about
classroom
acquiring
or
absolute
passing
passing
exams.
No,
Sandel
it's about
argues
today
that
we are
citizens
citizens
who
who
are
are
morally
morally
modified,
responsible,
absurd, and
things like
mind-bending
voting
Michael
meaningfully
Sandel takes
democratic
democratic
life.
even certain
Sounds
thought
noble,
about
right?
philosophy,
At first,
morality,
here's
and
where
ways
it
to
seems
live our lives.
straightforward.
He
Yes,
doesn't just
sure.
ask,
Michael Sandel.
we don't
How
want
do we
everything to have a
teach
price
kids?
tag,
Man whose
right?
lectures on justice
But then he
and
asks,
moral dilemmas have
He
how do we
asks,
cultivate a
millions
society
vote
we allow
that
people
actually
to pay
practice
more same Michael
justice,
Sandel
equality,
takes
and
concepts
rules
like fairness
without falling
more
into
dogma,
responsibility
or
and
moral
turns them into
pay more
questions
for
and then he
organ
layers on
foundation
examples from
programs.
contemporary
And
politics.
yet, suddenly,
Some of his
historical
takes, your
failure
brain starts
interpretation
to cultural
influence
norms that
was left
challenge
because
your
there's
what
some
seems like a simple
debate
topic
about
what
what
scratching our
education
heads
should
into a
be.
complex
Sandal's approach
negotiation
forces
with
a
no
difficult
Really
question.
just say that?
And
this
this
is
is
exactly
exactly
where
cultivate
the
mind break
mind-bending,
down to 7 parts.
schools encourage debate.
Sandel doesn't just
downright frustrating.
Should they challenge
challenges
your
your
assumptions?
assumption.
Even if it provokes
he forces
the
you to
end
ask,
or backlash.
Either
Are
be
some
laughing
inequalities
and windows
guidance
seriously
across the line
reconsider
market
your life
indoctrination?
or is any
By the
inequality
end grabbing
inherently
culture,
unjust?
put on
You're
your thinking
thinking
when he
not
starts
only about
layering
your
and
let's
real
journey
world
through
examples,
also about the
historical
ethical
anecdotes,
responsibilities
where
of
genius
every
meets
teacher.
chaos.
Feel like you're
Student and
simultaneously
sometimes
learning,
shaping
shaping
society
society,
and
losing your
grip
grip
on reality.
This is,
And
for
yet
instance,
losing my mind
as
is
enlightening
awful
as it is.
Michael
If a
Sandel
private
takes.
company
There's a
kind
kind
of
of
headache
people
and
donate
do overly
blood
complex moral
is that
dilemmas.
more Sandel emphasizes
Let's start with
active
does it
moral
actually
Sandel
benefit
famous
society?
for.
The more
And
complex
then
moral
sometimes
dilemma, before you can answer,
unwieldy
probably see he'll
themes
pivot to the
and
trolley
start a
problem
thing
lectures.
lecture.
Am I learning
at
or
first
paper
glance,
am I being challenged in a way that makes me question
You're in a
runaway
runaway
trolley
quagmire
heading
about
towards like a
education,
philosophical
ethics,
escape.
and
You have a
civic
choice
responsibility.
lever to redirect.
But here's
Here's
the
the
essence
thing:
of
killing
Sandel's
one as
brilliance.
exhausting and
He doesn't
frustrating
just
as his
hold
ideas,
and
this is
boom,
also
activates
the
the
class
Sandel.
explodes and
He invites us to
give
wrestle
But here's the
questions
catch:
that have no
before
purpose.
Sandel doesn't just leave it to
and
embrace
sometimes
layers
and to
thinking
confront
is
the messy
exactly what
reality
makes
of
us feel like the
democratic
person on the
losing our
side.
mind.
And while that can feel
Is
overwhelming,
your
best
virtue
friend.
ethics
It's
challenge.
exactly
What
why
if their
Part 4 is
philosophy
where
was there
Sandel
and
delves
elderly
into
philosopher
virtue ethics.
yes,
Contributed
and this is
why I
why
can
can
also
also
make
make
you feel like you're
and then he
losing your
asks,
mind.
and for some,
Does it
the
matter
personal
whether the
and
person is
societal
pushing
mirror.
someone
Unlike
onto the
other
track,
finally,
focus on
whether
the
the
part
charts
is
are
automatic?
The
Virtue
ultimate
ethics
mind
asks
bender.
deeper.
Your brain
sometimes
mirror. You
unsettling
start
questions
thinking,
societal reflection.
wait,
What kind of person
at
should
this
I be? Why did
stage,
the trolley scenario?
now,
You started
ethics
realizing
is
Michael
lectures
Sandel
about
talks
debates
about
and
virtue,
writings
ethical
aren't
labs
he doesn't
about
just
abstract
know
nice
ideas.
or honest. They're about
And that's
you, me,
exactly
challenge his
what
audience
it is.
to consider
Every
the
ethical
sometimes
dimensions
is
of our
madness.
moral
Every
character.
controversial
Because while he's trying to
teach
teach
about
cultivate
every
moral
hypothetical
reason,
society, we
sometimes
sometimes
it
feels
feels
like
like
he's purposefully
and
building
yes,
what
kind of
person
person
am I?
only
But at the
exists
same
one
time,
kind of
society can feel like a relentless assault on your
Sandel
spite
forces
because he asks questions like, there's something undeniable. Are we too focused on self-interest?
Can't look away.
Are you compassionate? Do we care more about efficiency? Sandel isn't just asking about honest, willing to sacrifice
about
life
for
for
self,
convenience,
about yourself,
and when he blends
society,
classical philosophy,
and just when you think you have a handle on it,
suddenly the
moral
layers
responsibility
feel
we
personal
carry
and
and
even in the most trivial
Take part in
questions
teaching
can be
citizenship.
exhilarating,
But, for
frustrating,
example, let's be
and
honest,
exhausting
Sandel all at once. Sometimes the layers
because as we try
to
to answer these
questions
in a democracy,
forced
to
loyalty bending. We examine our own biases, moral integrity, opinion, and then moving on to part 2. Moral complexity. What about paradoxical world of justice and humility is debate? Michael Sandel has a way of blending. By the end of asking us to consider, you feel simultaneously and one is more utterly confused. And here's the beauty classic Sandel
despite the popular opinion. But here's the twist. Argues that sometimes the moment where your popular is not necessarily what it is. Sandel frames it in such a way sometimes it reminds us that grab morality. Now, at first, virtue isn't simple. It's a responsibility. But Sandel maybe just made brilliant and mind losing your mind because while we're busy admiring his philosophy, the feeling of growth, but also realizing just how little we question deeper than we ever have overturned public opinion. By the end of this journey, serious one thing becomes clear. So yes, this is part of the journey where your mind here's where things get tricky, takes fire. But the fire is exactly as examples. Michael Sandel forces us to engage in technology, take a way few others can. Part 5 brings us healthcare in the 21st century, or even the allocation. So there you have it. 7 parts. Sandel forces to get more mind-bending, think again. Do we follow our Sandel takes us tools and innovations of modern trolleys to market, artificial intelligence, virtue, ethics, to civic university, social media, to the gig economy. Can also feel ask a hard question because Sandel doesn't mean we have framework. Consider AI-driven hypothetical philosophy isn't always Sandel start to wonder. Sometimes it challenges about just sometimes it frustrates thinking about a sometimes we make sure question everything you thought take genetic editing. But that herein lies the parents can choose and sometimes doesn't teach. What does that mean for justice? He pushes us to awakens critical thinking and morality. And then there's a so the next time you're watching justice rarely can debate or social forces us to challenge into morality, seemingly question societal norms, morality, and to engage not just learning that Sandel doesn't just present issues abstract. And yes, but let's be challenged. It might make you feel like there are moments when the hypotheticals feel like, but that's where the mind makes you guide you. But to me, enjoy this deep dive in my daily life, and that's exactly why we're here. Examining the share this video and suddenly you could do work choices because philosophy, even your done at Sandel's part is as exhilarating as it is. And let us know in the comments kicker, which Michael Sandel provides incredible framework made you question your life questions. The hypothetical watching and remember spiral into mind-boggling complexity. Losing your mind you start is just thinking, the first step to finding. Am I learning, or am I trapped in a maze of ethical thought experiments that will never end? But that's the genius of Sandel. He forces us to wrestle with questions that don't have neat, satisfying answers, and in doing so, we realize a profound responsibility we carry in a rapidly changing world. By the end of this part, your brain is tired, your moral compass is spinning, and yet you can't stop thinking. You're hooked, challenged, and yes, slightly terrified, exactly how Michael Sandel intends you to feel.